sound of music.
Ever put on one of those movies that starts out like any other but ends up being the best movie you've ever seen?
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
It was October 10th, 2013, the final installment of the trilogy. There was Sean James, Nicholas Angel, Gary King, Edgar Wright, and me. Sean was funny. He fancied himself as a bit of a slow learner, but really he was just a couch potato. In the end, he found himself in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. He loved it. Nicholas was the serious one of the group. He wasn't the kind of guy we would usually hang out with, but he was the best laugh, and the town they sent him to was absolutely bollocks. Gary was a pretty cool guy. He was always right, got the girls. I think he believed all that. Sweet, really. And Edgar. Edgar was my wingman. The one guy I could rely on to create a masterpiece time and time again. He loved me. I'm not being funny, but I loved him too. There was nothing we were gonna miss about Hollywood. If you don't understand what that opening was all about, basically it was the summary of the 3 films we're gonna be talking about today. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. Dubbed the Cornetto Trilogy, all of them are made by Edgar Wright and stars Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. But these movies are not connected in the MCU type way. They all feature their own standalone stories that are very different from one another. Some would even say that these movies are not connected at all, but today I want to dive into these movies and their themes and messages because that is where the actual connection between these movies lie. And that is because all these movies are showcasing an essential part of growing up and becoming a fully fledged adult. Without further ado, Shaun of the Dead focuses on the need of taking charge of one life and accomplishing something. Just like Shaun says.
You know, I got things I want to do in my life.
When?
Despite saying this, in his actions, Shaun is living his life on autopilot. Going to the shops, working his dead-end job, playing video games, and of course, being in the pub. Ironically, Shaun was walking around like a zombie long before the apocalypse broke out. And the movie even showcases this multiple times. A detail and a story element that Edgar Wright uses to tell this story is manifesting the main character in the environment around him. For Shaun, this means that the 2 roommates he lives with, Ed and Pete, are manifestations of the duality within Shaun himself. Pete, for instance, is the embodiment of what Shaun wants in life. He is accomplished, he has a good job, and he's responsible. Ed, on the other hand, is a showcase of Shaun's bad habits. He smokes, he has no responsibilities and no goals in life. In the beginning, Shaun is oblivious to the zombie invasion around him. But when he eventually does figure out that the zombie invasion is upon them, this forces Shaun to change. At the same time, Pete has just been turned into a zombie. With Pete gone, so is Shaun's previous aspirations about career and success. That is no longer important. Instead, saving his friends, ex-girlfriend and mother is. Towards the end of the movie, Ed also dies, and this symbolically shows the other part of Shaun that is now gone. In a heartbreaking goodbye, Shaun is once again forced to change. Through the deaths of the people around Shaun, in Pete and Ed, also his stepdad and his mother, we see Shaun leave his old self behind and become a new Shaun, ready to take on the new world. He grows up.
Here come the fuzz.
Nicholas Angel is a policeman. Policeman officer, sorry. In this, he excels so much that he earns tons of rewards and outdoes every single other cop in London. Because of this, his higher-ups decide to send him to a little village town. On the surface, it might seem like Angel has it all figured out. He has a good career, he's healthy, and a good moral compass. However, I would argue that he's even more immature than Shaun. Ever since his uncle gave him a police-themed bike, he has wanted to become a police officer and hasn't given it a thought since. So while Shaun's immaturity is characterized by his lack of direction and responsibility, Angel's, on the other hand, is characterized by his single-mindedness and inability to create an identity outside of his job. In a little town, Angel gets paired up with Danny Butterman. Danny has a very childish idea of what being a cop is like, which is generated by his extensive action movie collection. This clash of characters creates the strongest bromance of any movie I've ever seen. This dynamic slowly challenges Angel's rigid worldview, and he slowly learns to appreciate aspects of life outside police work, such as the value of human connection. As the plot of the movie unfolds, it forces Angel to embrace the action hero type cop with explosions and a massive shootout. This experience clearly changes his priorities in life, and he learns to understand the need for balance. Angel grows up by redefining his existence in friendship instead of just being a police officer. As a person who also has a difficult time of switching off and relaxing, this movie really hits home with me. But not only that, it's also the funniest of the 3 to me. And with that,
I'm afraid the end is nigh.
The world's end!
the last movie of the trilogy explores what happened to the rebellious popular guy we all know from school, manifested in the character of Gary King. Gary is stuck in the past, desperately clinging on to his high school memories. In an attempt to recreate the persona that made him cool in his youth, he reunites with all his childhood buddies in their childhood town to recreate and finish their failed pub crawl. Gary's determination to finish the crawl quickly becomes a metaphor for his refusal to move on from the past. This time, however, he is slowly forced to confront his views and mistakes from the past, giving him a chance to accept it and move on. While all of Gary's friends have said that they've moved on from the past,
I don't know if you're aware of this, Gary, but we are not teenagers anymore. The past where it is. It's bad enough having to look at your old ugly mugs.
this is simply not true. Pete never took a risk in his life, always taking the easy options like working for his rich dad. But this time, he has to confront his childhood bully. Steven here failed to confess his feelings to Sam, a crush he had in high school. Instead, he has been having unfulfilling sexual relationships with much younger women. My man. But this time around, he tells her how he truly feels. And then we have Andy, probably the most interesting of the side characters. In their childhood, Andy never stood up to Gary, but always let his unhinged behavior go without consequence. Therefore, he feels partially responsible for the state that Gary is in, and that is why towards the end of the movie, Andy can't get himself to leave Gary. Instead of severing all ties to his past, he decides to save Gary, redeem him, get through to him. So even though Gary's confrontation with the past is at the focus of the story, all of his friends also has to come to terms with their past. Gary is also forced to do one of the hardest things we all need to do sometimes here in life. He receives help, and not only that, but he also admits that he was wrong and apologizes for it.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling.